some blueberries in there. We're gonna throw some strawberries in, yes, with the tops, because it's all getting blended in together. You got spinach in it, you might as well use strawberry tops. Scoop some almond butter in for flavor, and then a banana. Drop it on, throw it on the Vitamix, and then a bunch of good stuff blends together. We're here in the Kight kitchen, as you can see, in case I guess in this case, this is an informative sign, but in my house, I already know what this is and where we are. So one of the areas where I think E+R=O helps people the most, or has the potential to help people the most, is in their health, and particularly in their diet. And you know, so much of my work and our team's work is in a competitive environment or in a performance environment, right? We're trying to work with the team, we're trying to work with athletes, we're trying to work with entrepreneurs and businesses, we're trying to make money, we're trying to win games, trying to save money, serve customers. And yet, a huge part of E+R=O is at a personal level. And one of the things in all of my keynotes, just about all of my keynotes, that I end up addressing eventually is the topic of health, and specifically the topic of diet and exercise, because those are two things that are in our control. And E+R=O is obviously built around controlling that response, controlling the one thing that you control, that I control. And that is my decisions, the objectives, and the standards that I make those things by. Eating is one of the things that is the easiest and most directly in your control, that can have the biggest impact on your life and on your health, your mental well-being, how you feel emotionally, a lot of different areas. And yet it's probably one of the biggest struggles that most people have. It's one of the biggest stressors and pressure that people feel in their health and in their emotions. And it's a burden a lot of people carry for years, going up and down, fluctuating with a lot of different things. And I see a lot of people carrying weight unnecessarily. So I'm here in my house, in my kitchen. I'm just gonna talk through how I think about eating and how I apply E+R=O on a daily basis to make decisions. And the first part, I think most people underestimate and they don't get about eating and about their diet. Not a diet, right? But their diet. Diet meaning whatever it is that you put into your body, right? The first thing is people don't appreciate and understand how many eating decisions they make a day. I think they imagine that they make 3, 4, 5 eating decisions a day. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, and maybe a snack, something in between. And that's how they think about their diet, is those 4 or 5 decisions. When the reality is you make hundreds and hundreds of eating decisions a day. Hundreds. And when you're forced or you're faced with making hundreds of decisions a day, the likelihood of having a breakdown at some point across hundreds of decisions, especially if you're doing it every day, it's massive. So one of the first things I do is I try to minimize my eating decisions to the fewest that I can possibly make. And I try not to make hundreds of eating decisions. In fact, what I try to do is I try to think ahead about E+R=O. I think first about the outcome that I want. That's the number one piece. And for me, the outcome that I want, the objective for me, is to have good fuel in my body that tastes as good as it can, and I enjoy the experience as much as I can to make myself feel good and look the way that I want and fuel and perform my body, right? That's what I'm after. I'm not after primarily great tasting food is not my biggest objective. It's just not. That's a standard I've set. So I like good tasting food, but what I understand about the world I live in, and you live in this world as well, is that the best tasting food is rarely the food that is the best for me, right? I love burgers from Burger King. Okay, I love burgers from Five Guys. I love big old Chipotle burritos. I love a great chicken parm from the local Italian shop. And while those foods taste fantastic and I eat them from time to time, they're not my priority. Because if they become my priority, if taste becomes my priority, if satisfying my impulses becomes my priority and the main objective in E+R=O, well then my response will be in pursuit of those things, and very, very quickly I will not feel good, I will get out of shape, I'll get lethargic, then I'll be upset and guilty at myself for not eating well for a long period of time. I won't like the way that I look, I won't like the way that I feel. All of a sudden those emotions start stacking up and I get into a bad place. You might know what that feels like. So I avoid that altogether, right? I don't get in that place. I don't go to that place because I set my objectives on the front end. Fuel myself, give myself what I need to be who I want, eat in the way that matches how I want to look in my life, feel in my life, and operate in my life. So with that objective, the second thing I do is I acknowledge the events and circumstances that I'm in. Sometimes I'm here in the house, like right now, because we're shooting this during the pandemic, so less travel than I usually have. But most of the time I'm traveling through the airports where there's not, and in hotels, or in cities I don't live in, obviously, where there's not an abundance of easy to access food that fits the parameters that I want to eat within, right? So I have to understand the context I'm in. But when I'm in the house, there's a lot of food that's easy to access. And there's two things that I could build my house for. There's two things I could engineer in my house. One is I could engineer my house to make this an impulse-rich environment where I have a lot of foods that I have to resist over and over and over and over again while I'm sitting in my office, or I'm sitting on the couch, or I'm over down in the basement, or I'm hanging out with my kids, or sitting down just for a nice quiet evening with my wife. If I have a house full of things that are tempting but not good for me, even if I'm 50% good in resisting those things, the other 50% I'm going to go engage, and I'm going to indulge, and I'm going to act on the impulse. And I'll give myself credit for the 50% that I resist, but the other 50% aren't going to do great things for me. So the second thing I do after setting my objectives with E+R=O is I set the context and I manage the event. I can't control it, but I manage the event as best I possibly can. And I don't put myself in circumstances and situations to force myself to resist things that I don't want to have to resist, or I don't want to decisions I don't want to have to make. So in this house, we put ourselves in a situation where most of the food, almost all the food that we have in here, is food that we can eat without having to worry about it. Try to be really smart about that. Not perfect, not strict, just smart to achieve those objectives. The second piece I do, and this is part of my response, but also part of the event. This is how response can influence an event. What I do is I do something called intermittent fasting. And I start eating at 12 noon, although today it's 2:15. And sometimes that happens, right? I had a board meeting from 11:30 to 1, so I didn't get to eat at noon, so we stretched out until 2:15. I just don't eat for the first half of the day. And a lot of people will say, I can't do that. And as soon as you start telling yourself what you can and can't do, of course, like if you say I can't, well, a lot of people will say they can't until they find out that they actually can. A lot of people say, oh, that's not good for me, or I won't, until they find out that it's really productive. That's how a lot of people get themselves into situations where they get in trouble or they get into a hole, is an unwillingness to climb out, an unwillingness to try something new, an unwillingness to engage in something that is uncomfortable. And what I would always tell people, and I tell you, is if you're not in a great place and you're already feeling uncomfortable, well, then what would exchanging the discomfort that's not producing something for you, what would that mean compared to doing something uncomfortable that actually gives you something of long-term value? So yeah, it's going to be uncomfortable, but if I don't eat well, I'm going to be uncomfortable for a much worse reason. And so I'd rather go through the discomfort of maybe not eating all of the best tasting foods and all the most amazing stuff all the time and anytime I want, because that's going to lead to a discomfort of a very different kind that's a lot more destructive. And go to the discomfort, potentially, not anymore for me, but maybe the discomfort of not eating until noon and being a little hungry, because I think that's actually a really good thing. So here's what I do. Here's how I manage those two things. I have the outcome. I manage that event as I put myself in situations and I avoid situations that might trigger certain things for me. And I leave room for flexibility and adjustments without being rigid. Believe me, I enjoy plenty of things. And then I focus on my response. And I look at my response and I really break down in what I eat, what I consume, on what are the things that really help, what are the things that don't. The answers are obvious, right? Minimize sugar as much as possible. Minimize the complex and manufactured carbohydrates as much as possible. And put as many good things into my body as I can, while having a margin of error that is small enough so as not to have a massive impact, but enough to keep that little spice and that little flavor and those little things that we like to have in our lives. And then for me, what I look at is I look at what are the best foods I can eat that I also love, which is to me very obvious, very straightforward. What are the best foods and the best meals I love to eat that are also really good? So one of my daily go-tos is a smoothie that I make. It's very simple, it's not complex. I don't dress it all up with ice cream. And it's not gonna win any taste awards, but what matters is that I like it. What matters is that it has good things in it. What matters is I can do it consistently because I actually enjoy this piece. So I'm gonna show you what I make and how I think about it. All right, so first thing, usually I'm starting with almond milk, which is a great alternative and it's great tasting, unsweetened vanilla. Don't get the kind with sugar, get the kind without. But I don't have any, so I'm gonna do water, which I don't think I've ever done before, and I'm gonna guess is gonna affect the taste and have it not be as good. But sometimes you have to adjust your response when the event is what it is. And you don't wanna come for a ride with me to the grocery store. I haven't eaten anything today, so I'm gonna start with a base of protein. I go with My Protein, which I actually looked up on Labdoor, and it's got, used it for years, but it's one of the highest ratings on Labdoor in terms of its quality. Labdoor.com, they do great, they rate a lot of stuff. So we'll go a little bit more here. I don't always do protein in it, but today we are. And then the rest of the ingredients are really simple with good stuff. All right, we're gonna throw a spinach in, some blueberries in there, some strawberries in, scoop some almond butter in for flavor, and then a banana. Drop it on, throw it on the Vitamix, and then a bunch of good stuff blends together. Most important part of this, easily, is having a go-to cup to drink out of, right? Have a go-to, okay? Get yourself prepared. But then sometimes, ooh, let's see, did I make a rookie move? Oh, I don't know, see, a little harder with the water. It's more than what the cup holds, so now we gotta drink. Let's see. I don't know how this is gonna taste with just water, but it's fine. Guess what? It tastes fine. Is it ideal? No, this one probably isn't. But remember what the objective is, right? The objective is not to have a lunch like we're at the Taj Mahal or underneath the Eiffel Tower in Paris. We're trying to get good things in our body. We're trying to be smart, trying to be healthy, keep that response focused on the outcome that you really want. So we'll do this. Probably have a couple pieces of salami and cheese, which is a go-to for me. And then a nice little lunch for me. So E+R = O. Prioritize the outcome that you want. Stay anchored on that. Understand the events that you have. Minimize your exposure to events that trigger responses where you have to make a lot more decisions. And then focus in your response on the things that you know work. Put the things that you know work into practice. Don't let the knowledge not turn into action. Use the knowledge that you have about how to be smart and how to be healthy and point it towards the objectives that you want. And if you have to do that a few hundred times a day, you gotta get at least 80% of those right, maybe more. Right? But if you can minimize some of those choice points, if you can minimize the action on the impulses and just say no a lot more often, or say yes to the right things, so that you don't have to say no to those things that aren't taking you where you wanna go, you're gonna put yourself in a lot better position. I'd rather make 15 or 20 eating decisions a day rather than 200, 250. And so that's how I do it. That's the process, and now I'm gonna enjoy this and then put the rest in here and you enjoy your day. It's actually pretty good.
There you go.
It's actually pretty good.